Welcome again to Profiles on Nantucket Community Television. I'm Charley Walters. My guest today is Captain Robert Cameron. He is the author of the children's book series, Tucky the Nantucket Whale, and he is indeed a captain. And we will be talking about both those subjects in this show. Captain Robert Cameron, thank you for coming in.
You're welcome. I appreciate you doing this. Thanks, Charley.
What was the inspiration for Tucky the Nantucket Whale?
I think over the course of my whole career, seeing whales all around the world, and then in particular, some off the shores of Nantucket, everybody loves a whale. And I thought that would be good for a children's book series about a whale and Tucky the Nantucket Whale.
I believe there are 5 Tucky books.
Yes, 5 books, yes.
Okay, and tell us about them.
They range in from just talking about the Nantucket Island and being a special place, and then going offshore, going around the world and sharing some of the things about Nantucket with other countries and some of the sports. And my last one was about a fundraiser, and Super Bowl coach Belichick, he's part of it.
And that one is called?
That's flag football, yes.
Flag football with Tucky the Nantucket Whale. Bill Belichick, how did that come to be?
Well, I was really fortunate. But we were putting the flag football book together. I knew he had a home in Sconset, and I seen him around Nantucket. I took a stab at just writing to him. I wrote him a letter saying I'm putting this book together, and it's going to be about a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club. And I'd like him to be in it and do the coin toss to kick off the game. And so I wrote that in the letter, and a couple of weeks later, his secretary emailed me back, and she said, Coach Belichick got the letter, and he's given you permission to include him in the book. So it was fantastic.
Now, had you done any writing prior to these books?
No, I was executive with the oil company, and no, in fact, short letters. And in fact, I needed my wife and others to add the adjectives, superlatives, and things for a children's book. And I have a great publisher that helps with that too.
How long does it take to write one of these Tucky books?
It takes anywhere from 9 months to a year.
And as I said, you've done 5, but how long ago did the first one come out?
The first one was, it was November. It actually came out in 2015, but I actually started it in 2014, the end of 2014.
So you're about on a 1 a year pace.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Now, you, of course, are doing all the text, but you also have an illustrator. Tell us about him.
Rod Cole, he's spent a good bit of his life on the island, very familiar, with the island, and he's an artist, and he's never done illustrations before. But when I approached him about it, he said, "I'll give it a try." And the nice thing about him is he's familiar with the exact things that what I'm trying to put on paper, and he does a great job. All his illustrations. But I must qualify it, Charley. I also have another illustrator through Mascot Books, and that illustrator does promotional materials. He did the website for me. So there's 2, but for the books that we really should talk about is Rod Cole.
Rod could not do his work without your input, and your input, in part, aside from being the creator of Tucky,
Right.
I assume you often saw whales in your line of work.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So you're giving him firsthand advice, comments, whatever, about what Rod is doing.
Right. Each page, each illustration, Rod and I talk, and there's a number of iterations before we get it right, before I think it's right.
Talk some more about Tucky as a literary character, and not just the creature with its name on the book. What kind of a whale? What is Tucky like?
Tucky, he's a right whale, and he's he's a friendly whale, and he's trying to teach a lesson in each one of the books. And I try to emphasize about the environment, keeping the oceans clean, and that's a common theme almost through all the books. So that's Tucky, and just a friendly, nice whale trying to teach a lesson in each one of the books.
Now, does Tucky communicate with humans directly?
Yes.
And how big is Tucky in the books as opposed to how big a right whale is in real life?
Pretty much the same. I mean, a right whale is about 50 feet. And I even mentioned that some of the dimensions, 50 feet, eating 2,000 pounds of food a day, weighing about 2,000 tons. So it's pretty real. Yes.
Now, you've lived here for a number of years. How did you come to Nantucket?
Well, it was actually through my wife, Margie. She was back in the 60s working as a chambermaid and a waitress, and she worked working her way through college, and she worked for Dr. and Mrs. Walker. And I think a number of people on the island, I'm sure you and Nancy know, she was the principal of the school and just did so much for Nantucket. Well, Margie was like a seamstress, she did whatever Mrs. Walker wanted her to do, and she got compensated for her. And so it was her coming up in the late 60s. And then I didn't come up until the early 70s after I met Margie. And we loved it. And then Margie's sister ended up marrying someone that the Arnos, John Arno, who owned Vincent's restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So we would come up and visit and stay with them until it was like the early 90s when we bought a place out in Tom Nevers, and we had it for almost 25 years. It was fantastic. We redid it over, and it's just it was great out there. And Nantucket it's nice and small. You can get around everywhere, and it's a special place.
Well, Brooks Walker was an osteopath, and he and his wife lived on Fair Street,
yes,
number 3 or number 5. The house is still there. In fact, I remember going to see Dr. Walker as a patient in the 1970s. I think he still has family here, if I'm not mistaken. But that's a familiar name to people who have been on Nantucket for a while.
Oh, yes.
Well, now you came here through meeting your wife, but how did your wife happen to come here?
It was actually through Margie's sister, who was working and then married to John Arno at Vincent's. So she came up as a waitress, and that kind of started it.
Well, maybe she waited on me at some point many years ago.
and I think actually Margie's sister said she did. She waited on you. Yes.
Really?
Colleen, because I mentioned I was going to do this interview with you, and she said, "Yeah, if the occasion comes up, say that I did wait on Charlie." Colleen.
It's a small island. Well,
yeah,
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's get back to Tucky.
Okay.
And the actual publishing of the books. It is not easy to get a book published, and yet somehow you've managed to do 5 and counting. Tell us about how that came to be.
Well, actually, when I was on Nantucket, I actually went around to the different publishing houses. But since I was like a nobody, the different publishers in a nice way said you'd be like on the bottom of the list and just not sure when they would actually get around to publishing the book. And so based on that, I figured I better try another course. So I Googled different publishing companies, children's books. And one of them was right out of Washington, D.C. in Virginia. And from what I read about, it just seemed like something that maybe I could work with. But I still wanted to do face-to-face, making sure that I want to invest it with this particular company. And actually the CEO came down. He actually has parents in the next community from where we are down here in South Florida. So he came down to see his parents, then him and I had a breakfast meeting, and we hit it off really well. He explained the process, the how that they can really help, walk you right through this. And so I went on board with him. And the first one, we did really well, his project team, and how from the start to actually getting a copy in my hands, everything worked out well. There were some glitches along the way, but he made good with the different glitches, and some on my end and some on his end. So it was a good story. And based on that, I went on to the second book with him, and third, fourth, and fifth.
Well, they're very nicely put together. They do a good job with your work.
Yes. And I think they're proud of the Tucky books too. So they, from a promotion standpoint, and that's where their illustrator, he'll do promotional material. Like when I have book signings, I just have to contact him, and he'll put these promotional documents and posters and things together for me. And he's the one that put together the website, which I think really did a fantastic job. And just recently he updated it. So there's just a lot of things that Mascot Books does really well, for not just for me, I think from what I've seen on other children's books authors too.
Well, we're of course doing this program on Zoom, as we've been doing profiles for the last year now. Prior to COVID, did they have you traveling around the country at all, doing in-person appearances?
I was pretty much in the Nantucket area, the Cape Cod, and then down here in Naples. I mean, that's basically all I did. Barnes and Noble down here, a number of them up on Nantucket, the Whaling Museum, Mitchell's. I was really fortunate, a number of them on Nantucket. And the big one is the Waterside one down here in Barnes and Noble. And then, and we haven't talked about, but I do volunteer work for Home Base. It's a veterans organization. And I do complimentary book signing. 100% of the sales go right to the veterans. And that being the case, we did real well on the first few of them. And I actually had the general, who's General Ed Dyer. He's one of the directors of the Home Base organization down here. He came to the book signings with me. And the people that came up, they asked if he could book sign. So I would sign it. And I said, go ahead, Ed, you do it. And he is just a fantastic guy. So I digress. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. The character Tucky, is the Tucky in the first book pretty much the same Tucky as in the fifth book, say?
Yes.
And you have, Tucky isn't the only character in these books. You have, aside from Bill Belichick, you have other people too. But talk about the other characters in the books.
Well, the other characters are more cartoonish. It's Freddie the Seagull, Mr. Lobster, and Sammy the Seal. Those are the other three that are Tucky's, his friends. And then, of course, I bring in, I have to say, my grandkids, Jacob and Nathan, too. So they're in it also.
Are there other non-human characters that recur?
The only ones would be my grandkids. And I think that's pretty much it. Yes.
There's not a barracuda or a squid or anything like that.
No.
Okay. You've written 5. When does number 6 come out?
Wait, I'm sorry.
You've written 5 of these Tucky books. And
yes.
When does the 6th come out, or is it too soon to tell?
Well, originally I had 6 outlines all, put together when I actually went to Rod to say if he'd be interested in do the illustrations for me. So I do have a 6th book, and that 6th one's about scalloping. And I just thought there'd be, but I haven't, because of the pandemic and everything else, everything's on hold. So I do have a 6th book, and it is about scalloping.
Now, you touched on this a few minutes ago, profits going to various organizations and causes, but it's not just that one cause or organization, is it?
Well, I was also to Sunshine Kids, Kids with Cancer is an organization down here. And also I got involved with the Boston Pops, and I contributed quite a bit. It was my second book, the kiteboarding book. One of the chairwomen, she contacted me and she said she really liked the last illustration in there, and that's the Pops with the orchestra in the background, Jetty's Beach, and the fireworks display. And what she wanted to do, she said to me, could I make 1,000 of those copies? I wanted like 5x7 cards, and I wanted to put them in silver frames. And at the tables on the beach, I wanted each one of the table settings, I wanted to have that silver frame with the Tucky print. And I said, oh, fantastic. So she did that. And you may have been, you and Nancy, one of them, on the beach at that time. And it's just amazing. Can you imagine? It was fantastic. You go right to sit down, and here's this silver frame with the Tucky. So it's great promotion. And then I signed 100 books at the hospital she wanted. So I got really involved with the Nantucket Pops. But the big one really is home base. Most of the proceeds are going to home base, helping our veterans.
Well, these books are a lot of fun, and we look forward to many more coming out in the years to come.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's back up chronologically and talk about your days as a captain. First of all, where did you grow up? Did you grow up near the shore?
I did, at the South Jersey shore. So I was always around the water, and I got nominated and an appointment for one of the federal academies, one of the 5 federal academies, and I went to Kings Point. So I graduated from there, and I just worked myself up very quickly. And when I was 28 years old, I had my first command. I was very fortunate that a major oil company has allowed me to command a ship at 28 years old. It was basically a $50 million ship and cargo, and a lot of responsibility. In fact, I was oftentimes the youngest on the ship. Most of them were 40, 50 years old at the time. So anyway, so I started sailing captain. I did that. And my last ship that I was captain on, we were running between Cherokee, Grande, Panama, and the U.S. Gulf. And I got to meet a lot of the people on the other end, the chartering end. And my ship performed the first out of 100.
What were the criteria on which they were basing that judgment?
On the charter party performance. And in the charter party, it's about time and turnaround. It's about fuel consumption. It's about the amount of cargo loaded in and out, and relationships. So those are kind of the core criteria that they looked at, and I did really well. And not just me; it was actually my ship and the crew. I mean, it was great teamwork.
Now, the ships you were captaining, and I know there would have been different ships, different sizes, and so on. But if there was such a thing as a typical ship you commanded, how large was that?
Close to like 3 football fields long. That's pretty much on average.
And just to put that in context, how big is the slow boat on Nantucket?
It's I believe it's about 500 feet, maybe half the size.
Okay, so your ships were twice the length of, say, the Nantucket slow boat. And what about the width?
The width was about 105, 110 feet beam. So I'm trying to think of the ferry, maybe 40, 50 feet. So.
Now, Nantucket gets its oil barged into the harbor here, but your ships, were they too big? Would they have been too big to come into Nantucket Harbor?
They would be, and because of the draft and just the wharfage that's needed to bring those. The ships are too long, but we used to transit the Nantucket waters though on some of the ships, and it's kind of neat. Going up to Boston, Portland.
You're talking about the Atlantic Ocean and not Nantucket Sound, I assume.
No, Atlantic Ocean, yes.
Okay. How large was the crew on these ships?
Anywhere from 25 to 35 crew members.
And how long might it be between ports?
If you ran coastwise, it could be just a few days. Otherwise, if you ran offshore, it could be a week to 10 days.
And would you be stopped? Let's say you're going from point A to point B, but you have to spend the night somewhere. Did that happen?
Sure.
But you would stay on the ship.
We'd stay on the ship, yes.
Okay. Now, where did you sail? I know a lot of different places, but tell us about them.
I was fortunate all around the world. Going up and down the East Coast, down to Panama, through the canal, West Coast, up to Alaska, over to the Far East, sailed down to Cape Town, South Africa, and around the Horn, Australia, New Zealand. Trying to think. I pretty much, and then over to London, Rotterdam, Netherlands. Pretty much I didn't travel to a ship to Russia, but so that's probably one of the few places, and also the Middle East. I really didn't take any ships into the Middle East.
And was this always oil you were shipping?
Oil, yes.
Exclusively oil. There weren't automobiles or anything else, or whatever.
Well, early on, I did sail on container ships and freighters, but I really like tankers, so I made my career on oil tankers.
And what would you say the longest period of time between ports was? I mean, how long would you be out to sea without coming into a port?
A few weeks, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, really?
Yeah, yes.
Really? Now, this is entirely by coincidence. Just a few days before we were taping this show, there was the accident in the Suez Canal. I would love to hear your comments about that situation. Okay,
it's just from what I'm reading. I mean, we're still waiting, I guess, for the that maritime and investigation report. But basically, I mean, from what I read, here's a ship, one of the biggest container ships in the world. It's 1,300 feet long, and then going through the Suez Canal, the width is less than 1,000 feet. So as it's making its coming in the entranceway and head north, the combination of the winds and sandstorm actually threw the vessel off course, and the bow of the ship went over towards the bank. And so when that does that, there's something called, and I don't know, bank suction, bank cushion. And what it does is, as it's throwing the bow of the ship to the bank, the rear end of the ship, the stern section, is actually pulled to the other side. So that's what happened. You had this 1,300-foot ship actually wedged in between this channel, and the longer it stayed wedged, it really fetched up, and that's why it took like almost 6 days to break her loose. I mean, they had dredges, they had they had tugboats, they had salvage crew. I mean, they had all the different resources to try to pull her off, which eventually they did. But so it's a shame it happened, because it stopped, supplies, to and from, and causing prices around. It affected the whole world, global transportation.
I'm assuming that's the only time something like this has happened in the Suez Canal. Is that right? A complete blockage over an extended period of time?
I think I read it happened a few other times, but maybe not as severe as this.
Now, Suez Canal is obviously a very important point on the globe, but it's not the only one. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, is there one in Southeast Asia where a huge amount of shipping goes through?
Well, the one other that comes to mind for me is the Panama Canal. I mean,
Yeah.
the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean, and that one plays a key part. And so, if you want to compare, but it's the Panama Canal with the Suez Canal, I think are the two kind of canals I think run in parallel, maybe.
Now, this sort of thing didn't happen to you, but it was obviously not smooth sailing all the time when you were at sea. Talk about some of the problems you ran into from time to time during your career.
I personally, I did have some groundings, and fortunately, the groundings that I had were on sandy bottoms, so there was no damage to the hull of the ship, as opposed to the ship up in Alaska, the Valdez, where she actually grounded, and it was a rocky bottom and just tore the bottom. So getting back to me, I mean, I had a few incidents. I babied the ships. I'd rather get chewed out by the office saying, Cameron, you're going too slow, whatever. And I got the ship safe, the crew and the ship and the cargo in safe without any incident. I really never had any major damage or during the whole career, my whole career. I babied the ships like it was mine.
Now, when it came to weather, did you have the same philosophy about going out in potentially bad weather?
Yeah, so sometimes, I mean, it's pretty severe out there, and I get seasick. So
Wait a
it's
minute, stop right there. You
yeah,
captain ships all over the planet and you get seasick?
I do. It's unbelievable. I think of the days all the way back when growing up down the Jersey Shore on the on the fishing boats, the charter fishing boats. I could smell. I still to this day I can smell that fuel and the fish. It kind of making me. But I loved being out there, and I persevered. So, but on the big ships, um, if I knew, I was constantly aware of the weather. I mean, I always look in advance, and if I knew a storm or bad weather was coming, I'd stick to either saltines. The steward or the cook, he knew it. He or she knew. I would just have toast with cheese. So I very very bland. I wouldn't have the big spread that everybody else would be having. I would stick to strictly something bland and maybe sipping 7 Up, not my 10 cups of coffee that I normally have a day.
How much freedom did you have to change course?
You had 100% freedom because you were responsible for the ship. You're the only one. So, and responsible for the crew and the cargo on the ship. So you adjust accordingly, making sure that the safety of the ship at all times.
Was there a member of your crew who was devoted completely to keeping up with the weather?
Yes, we had a radio operator that was constantly getting fed telexes and weather reports, and we had fax machines on, so you could look visually. And so, 12 hours, 24 hours in advance, you could see, the low pressures areas and with hurricanes, making sure my rule of thumb was trying to stay 200 miles off, the eye of the hurricane, and as good as you can. So, I mean, there's within limits.
Now, your ships were about 1,000 feet long, give or take. Uh,
Right.
Even in the worst storm, um, I'm not sure how to phrase this. How much danger is there of a boat that size capsizing or sinking?
Well, the thing is, the steel on the ship is 3/4 inch plate. They're 40-foot plates, by 10 feet that actually build the ship. It says high tensile steel, and it's 3/4 inch plate. and you can only have so many flexes. It's kind of like, it does how many flexes before it actually breaks. So if you're like on the bridge of the ship and you're watching, that bow go up and down and then slamming into the sea, you don't want that slamming. So you've got to try to ease it off, and you're taking that sea in a different hit onto the vessel. And obviously you're slowing down and you're just kind of running. But to answer your question, we have throughout my career, prior to the ship going into the shipyard every 2 years, you inspect the whole ship for any kind of fractures, and then you get them repaired in the shipyard, or if they're so bad, you just take them out of service and you get it done then. So we do have fractures, and it's for the most part, the crews and the office are attentive to making sure that you don't get in a situation where you're going to lose the ship. I mean, I hope that I answered that right. I mean, it's just we're constantly looking at, and there's monitors on the ship making sure, the stress, the trim and stability tables, the stress, that you don't have an unfortunate situation. But I'll tell you one. Can I just say?
Please do.
I can say one incident where we had a situation. It was a ship that we had on charter. It was 90 miles off Acapulco. It was running between Panama and Alaska, and on its way to Panama with a full load of Alaskan crude oil, ship 90 miles off course, off the Mexico, Acapulco. The engine room flooded. So you had 57 feet of water in the engine room. Now think about that amount of stress on the ship. And 57 feet of water in the engine room. You have a bulkhead that separates that with the rest of the ship. And surprisingly, that didn't fracture. And we did all the trim and stability tables. We were able to put a temporary plug on where that water was coming in, and we pumped out that 57 feet of water, and we towed that ship up into Long Beach, and we lightered 13 lighterings, small amounts, into barges.
Well, I wanted to ask you about something else, a related topic. From time to time, we'll read about rogue waves. And sometimes you get the feeling that they're all over the place all the time. How much of a difficulty are rogue waves?
In the time that I was sailing, I never came across one. I mean, I heard about them. I mean, there were some big waves, 50, 75-foot waves. But it's just, it was just a natural course, and you'd have to maneuver accordingly, and slowing the ship way down and kind of just going through it.
I'm told, I may have this one wrong, please correct me. If one is a ferry boat captain from Hyannis to Nantucket, the license specifies the size of the boat and the waters the boat will be sailing in and so on. But with your kind of a ship, 1,000 feet, you're going all over the world. What's the licensing process like for a captain such as you?
But it's a long process. I mean, you get your licensing through the U.S. Coast Guard, different captains of the ports up and down the coast. But to answer your question, it's about a week-long series of tests, and it's administered by the captain of the port of the different ports up and down the East Coast and West Coast. And it's pretty rigorous, and there's a lot of training. Schools like Mass Maritime, Maine Maritime, California Maritime, Those schools are really good to help prepare you for the licenses. And then there are other, through the unions, they have their own schools. And of course, I went to Kings Point, the same type thing. So they really help you prepare for for your license. And you have to, then it's third, second, just like an airline pilot, third officer, second officer, first officer, and then captain.
How would foreign countries handle licensing?
Pretty much the same, Charlie, yes.
So you'd have to go to country X, Y, or Z and get the same kind of training from whoever happened to be over there.
They had the maritime schools, and where they don't, they actually come to the United States. And many of these foreign students are in the different academies, so including Kings Point.
I can't talk with you about captaining without asking you about piracy.
It's a big issue.
Did you ever run into that personally?
I did, yes. And when you're coming across that, I mean, we didn't have any kind of guns on the ships. And so what we used to do is we put 100-pound pressure on our water hoses. And if anything came close, we would just, open up that 100-pound pressure of water, and that would keep the boats off. And that did happen a few times. But now, I mean, those pirates are getting more and more sophisticated. So what the ship owners have done, my understanding is they've actually put a trained, their insurance companies required it to put like a trained crew on board. It might be 4 or 5 that were trained in with being able to handle guns. And so on some of the ships that go around in the piracy waters, in fact, in one of my Tucky books where he travels around the world, we talk a little bit about piracy.
And where did you run into it?
It was when we were going around the east coast of Africa, off of Beira, Mozambique, those areas. It's one of the areas that you got to be careful of.
And one final question that just popped into my brain. Did you have a favorite route? Was there one route in particular that you loved to do?
Not really. I think everyone had their own characteristics, and they were fun. Here's one I will say. It's not really fun, but the office said to me, I was waiting up in the New York harbor, and they said, we want you to go down and pick up a load in the Hess refinery in St. Croix. And I'm thinking, the ship that I was on, we've never been to St. Croix. I mean, that's like a big resort. And so I asked my second officer, I said, see if we have any charts for St. Croix. I don't remember or recall this ship ever going there. So he checked and he said, we don't have any charts. So I called my office, and they said, I said, we have no charts. We need a couple of them to get into St. Croix. And they said to me, he said, oh, come on, you can't bring a ship into St. Croix. It's a piece of cake. And I said, no. So coming out of New York Harbor, I actually had the pilot boat, bring me some charts that I could use. But alternatively, if I didn't have the charts, I would have hung off about 10 miles off of Christiansted. And when the pilot boat came out, we'd maneuver in. So, it's not really, it's just a little story. That's all. Sorry.
No, I can listen to these stories all day. Captain Robert Cameron, thank you for coming on. You've had a fascinating life, and you in 2 different fields, if I can use that word. And we're looking forward to the next Tucky book.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate, and then after that, just going, with the oil company for almost 25 years, and living in all those places, London, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur. So Margie and I were really fortunate.
Maybe you should write a book about yourself next time around.
Well, anyway, but really appreciate you doing this, Charlie. Thank you very much, and passing my regards to Nancy too. And thank you.
Will do. Thanks for coming on.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie.
For Profiles on Nantucket Community Television, I'm Charley Walters. Thank you for joining me, and please join me again.